reprise de débat. The honourable member for Timmins James Bay.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Je suis très fier de participer.
I am very proud to participate in this virtual debate. I am at home in the small village of Cobalt in Northern Ontario.
Moment for me in my 16 years of Parliament to participate virtually. And we're doing this because we are in an unprecedented economic and medical crisis. The biggest crisis our country has faced in nearly a century. The pandemic has upended everything, and it's actually inspiring to see how Parliament is attempting to find virtual ways and find ways to maintain the integrity of voting, to maintain debate. And so I'm very proud to speak for the people of Timmins James Bay this morning on this concurrence motion on the ethics report on Mr. Pesce-Solido. And I have spent many years taking on corruption in Parliament, pushing on the issues of ethics. And I had to admit, Madam Speaker, there was a moment this morning I was like, what report was that? The Pesce-Solido report? Yes, because we've had so many ethics violations against the Liberals. They stack up. We have to keep track of them. So this was certainly about his role with his law firm and his failure to disclose his clear conflicts of interest. And why does that matter? It matters because I was doing an interview recently with American journalists about the WE scandal. And they said to me, well, compared to the scandals we have in the United States, how do you think these things are serious? And I said to them, it's because we have the Conflict of Interest Act. It is because we have the Lobbying Act. It is because we have Elections Canada and elections financing rules, and we expect politicians to maintain them, that we are not in a situation like the United States right now, that the rule of law and the obligation of parliamentarians to follow the rule of law has to maintain a primary principle. So we've had a number of scandals under this government. Mr. Greywall scandal, I wrote to the ethics commissioner about that scandal. Now that has gone on to the RCMP. But the initial issues with the Greywall scandal was him using his position as a member of Parliament to further financial interests of friends, and that was in the notorious India scandal. But we've had Mr. Morneau, the finance minister, quit in the midst of an unprecedented economic crisis because his complete failure to even read the Conflict of Interest Act and to know he'd been put in a position of conflict in his dealings with the WE charity. Absolutely unacceptable. We have the Prime Minister, who's now under his third investigation. And really, the question that is at the heart of the WE scandal is how was it possible that a group who had built such close ties with all the key Liberals in power were able to come when they were in the midst of their own financial crisis and get upwards of $500 million because of who they knew. We should not be running government like this. And in the midst of an unprecedented pandemic, Canadians need to be assured that government is putting their interests first and not their interests of their friends. I think of the people of Saskatchewan that I represent in my riding who've been waiting for years for the government to sign off on basic things like a road so they could begin to move a new community. A community that this year had to live out in tents on the land in April because of COVID, because they couldn't be evacuated and they had no safe place to go. And when they heard about the WE scandal, they said to me, how is it possible that these guys could get $500 million so easily, and we have to fight and beg to get the government to recognize even the most basic changes in our communities? And that's the principle that we have to keep first and foremost when we're talking about conflict of interest. It's about the role of powerful insiders who should not have that access. I am certainly looking forward to the return of our committees. The Finance Committee was doing excellent work on the WE scandal. We need answers. official languages will be looking at the WE scandal because of the fact that this was a group completely unprepared to present their program in Quebec, and I think let alone the rest of the country. Ethics has certainly raised a number of questions about the relationships between key government ministers and the Kielburger brothers. We also have just had a finding of guilt against Liberal insider David McNaughton after I raised a question to the Ethics Commissioner about the former ambassador's work on behalf of Palantir. I think this is a huge issue, my friends, because Palantir is a deeply problematic surveillance company. This is a company run by billionaire tech giant Peter Thiel, who's I think has some very extreme right views and very questionable views on democracy. This is a technology that's been used to target migrant families, and we know the horrific abuses that are taking place in the detention centers. We know that Palantir honed its technologies in Iraq. It's been tied to the CIA and the FBI. This is a company that I don't think can say they have Canadian values. And yet, because they hired a top Liberal insider, they got an all-access pass to everybody. To Rick Tice, the Prime Minister's confidant, to the Deputy Prime Minister, to the Minister of Innovation, to the Chief of Defense Staff. How is it possible that a company like Palantir could get this kind of inside access just because they hired a top Liberal? I'm certainly looking forward to having that discussion at Ethics, and I'm hoping my colleagues in the Bloc, the Liberals and Conservatives, will support me in making sure that Mr. McNaughton does come and explain how he got this kind of access. So these issues of ethics and accountability are vitally important. But I think we also need to remember, my friends, that this discussion this morning is happening in the midst of a massive crisis that's facing us right now. And the fact that the Prime Minister prorogued Parliament to escape accountability on the WE scandal is something that we need to be investigating, because the reason we have an urgency this morning is because the Prime Minister did not let Parliament sit when it should have been sitting, and the CERB benefits are ending, and people are facing deep financial crisis right now. But our obligation at the end of the day is to make sure that we are there and rising up to meet the issues of the pandemic, because this second wave looks like it might be even outpacing the first wave very quickly. So in terms of what the CERB and the cutoff to CERB means, we know that the Prime Minister and the Liberal government before were looking to jail people who had were not eligible for getting CERB. They promised money for disabilities, and they never delivered it. Their last trial balloon was the fact that they were going to cut, when they modified CERB into its new form, from $2,000 a month to $1,600 a month. And what would that mean for people who have lost their work, who have no work to go back to? Well, just the other day, I spoke with a woman who just moved from Alberta to Ontario. She set herself up in a practice as a naturopath. She had taken on huge amounts of student debt. She set the practice up. She was going to be a self-employed businesswoman, and COVID hit, and she's had no ability to practice her work. $1,600 a month will be economically devastating. $2,000 a month through the winter will get her through to the other side. That's the focus right now, my friends. I was speaking with a woman who spent years as a self-employed broker, helping with tourism and tour plans for people. Well, there is no tourism going on. Without this money, she is economically destitute. So our priority right now has to be getting things fixed, being able to answer for the crisis that we're in. So as much as I enjoy and think it's really important that we get to talk about Liberal conflict of interest, I believe our priority this morning is to get back on the issue of dealing with the crisis in the pandemic, start showing Canadians that we can work together in this Parliament to deal with issues of people who have to take time off work because they're sick without being economically devastated, to make sure that the CERB gets through. It's about getting people through to the other side of this winter. This is going to be a hard winter, and we have to be there for them. As for the ethics violations, I think our committee is going to be very, very busy in the coming months, but we still have other issues as well. So I'm very pleased to participate in this. I thank my colleagues in the Conservative Party for bringing this motion forward. It is a good motion. It is worthy of study, but we do need today to get these measures passed so that people can get some economic security at this time, and they're looking for us to do this. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, my friends.